Hello, this is Arezki Daoud of risk assessment firm MEA Risk LLC and editor of the North Africa Journal. Today is the 10th of January 2020, and in this episode we'll look at the intersection of business corruption and political corruption in Algeria. Heralded as a model of the country's new industrial drive involving private and foreign capital, the automobile assembly industry in Algeria has completely collapsed. The recent announcement that Volkswagen has frozen its participation in the sector was the latest indicator, among so many, that confirmed the vanishing of an entire sector due to a plethora of problems confronting Algeria, from intense corruption to a bankrupt industrial policy. It is now clear that not a single vehicle will leave the assembly plants because there are no spare parts and kits to assemble. These kits are called in Algeria SKD and CKD. While the assembly sector is dead, only peripheral activities such as servicing, maintenance, and spare parts activity remain operational. To make things worse, and while most industry CEOs are in prison, there is no single economic or industrial official in government able to say what's the outlook for the sector. In this utter failure to set up an automobile industry, Algeria is not only losing jobs, but it is losing also all credibility vis-a-vis international automakers, be they in Asia like Kia and Hyundai, or Europe like Renault and Volkswagen. Affected assembly plants are those that bear the brands of Volkswagen, Kia, Hyundai, and others. For private Algerian firms Ival Group, the brands it represents include those of Mazda and Fiat. The teams hired by the deposed President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, including former Minister of Industry Abdeslam Bouchouareb, now on the run and sentenced in absentia for 20 years in prison, did everything to harm the industry, including no vision, except one that enhances corruption and bribery in their favor. Worse, they caused immeasurable losses for the public treasury. More than €1 billion vanished, according to figures revealed during the trial and sentencing of industry executive Mohamed Bairi of Ival, Hassan Arbawi of Kia, and Ahmed Mazouz of GM Trade. The new Tebboune administration is now formally responsible for cleaning up the mess. But with the new president having no legitimacy in the eyes of the Algerian public, he will likely focus on populist measures to buy public trust, and often such measures tend to clash with economic logic. The new president may not spend a great deal of political capital in fixing the industry's mess, but will spend more time on attempting to clean up his own image instead. Within Algeria, there is already talk of international car makers seeking to get rid of their existing agreements and switch partnerships with other Algerian partners believed to be cleaner on the corruption front. This undoing of an industry is already causing harm on the employment front. The shift from corrupt businesses to seemingly less corrupt competitors may accelerate after the Algerian justice system cleared former partners of Kia and Hyundai, Mohamed Shaibu and Omar Arabrab, of corruption, but who were initially swept away by the clan warfare that pitted generals against generals. While the Algerian public remained unimpressed about the first round of trials of former officials, the trials of 2 former prime ministers and a number of former senior government and business figures have exposed the depth of corruption in Algeria, and which has crippled the country's economy for decades. The recent corruption trials had a narrow and targeted focus on one sector of the economy, and that is the auto assembly industry, and also how President Bouteflika's most recent election campaign got financed. Which means that the hefty sentences and fines ruled against the now convicted officials are just a subset of what these convicts will eventually get once the other cases are added and piling up. In his indictment, the prosecutors asked the judge to impose heavy sentences against all the defendants, especially former Prime Ministers Ahmed Yahya and Abdel Malik Salal, and the former Minister of Industry, now a fugitive sheltered in France, Abdeslam Bouchouareb, against which 20 years of imprisonments have been requested. The other two former Minister of Industry, Mahjoub Beda and Youssef Yousfi, faced a 15-year jail sentence. Others, including businessman Ali Haddad, Ahmed Mazouz, Mohamed Bairi, and Hassan Larbawi, and the son of Prime Minister Salal, faced also heavy jail sentences. Addressing the court in tears, former Prime Minister Abdel Malik Salal told the judge, and I quote, "I beg you, do not let me end my days in prison. I have served the state for 47 years. I am not corrupt." End of quote. The court eventually ruled that the actions of the defendant, officials, and businessmen on trial resulted in Algeria suffering financial losses of nearly €1 billion, in Algerian equivalent 130 billion dinars just in the Odo Assembly space. The companies of Hassan Larbawi, who owns the Kia assembly plant in Batna, caused the biggest loss, estimated at 87 billion dinars. Those of Mazouz, 39 billion dinars, and the group Ival of Bairi Mohammed, 1 billion dinar. None of the foreign companies involved in the sector has been cited, even though they were also partners to these convicted businessmen and therefore were participant in corruption. The prosecutor's office has concluded that there has never been a car assembly industry, accusing the businessmen of having set up front companies to benefit from tax, customs, and land advantages. This without any positive impact for the market or the consumer. The prosecution said it was never a secret for the Algerian consumers, who have long known, and well before this trial, that the prices of the vehicles assembled locally were much higher than the ones that were imported as fully assembled vehicles. Abdeslam Bouchouareb, the Minister of Industry between 2014 and 2017, was the most cited official in the auto assembly industry debacle. It was he, according to the findings of the Public Prosecutor's Office and the various testimonies, who directly headed the commission responsible for ruling on the applicant's filings. The commission was fictitious, the investigations concluded, and legitimate companies such as the Ashaibu and the Civital groups, heard as civil parties, found themselves eliminated in favor of other operators close to the minister. Prime Minister Salal admitted that he had no authority over his industry minister. Fleeing abroad, Bouchouareb could not be heard, especially on the 2 bank withdrawals he made, estimated at a combined $200 million. The ex-minister is accused of having helped the Tahkout family, who was close to President Bouteflika, against Rabrab's Civital group in doing business with Hyundai. Rabrab and Shaibu told the court what Korean business executives told them, and I'm quoting, "Your problem is political. The authorities in your countries do not want us to do business with you." End of quote. The successors of Bouchouareb continued to manage the sector in the same way and refused to correct his mistakes. Among them was Mahjoub Beda, who admitted that he continued to work with the technical commission inherited from his predecessor in pretty much the same way. Beda owns massive funds spread in 9 bank accounts, real estate holdings in Algiers, and 2 publishing companies, and has not been able to justify the origin of the funds. Prime Minister Salal and Yahya were eventually convicted for criminal activity tied to the auto assembly sector. Prime Minister Salal, according to the prosecution, supervised in person the automobile assembly's legal and business transactions without informing the president, and more importantly, his son entered the capital of the Mazouz group, acquiring a 23% stake without spending a single dinar. Ahmed Yahya has been found guilty of embezzlement and money laundering because he could not justify the origin of more than $2.5 million held in his bank account. Another person, Yasmina Zarhouni, former governor of Boumerdès province, which is immediately east to the capital Algiers, was convicted for granting agricultural land to Bayri Mohammed, the CEO of Eval Group, while several officials of the Ministry of Industry who played a role in illegal land transfers will spend several years in prison. In exchange for steering auto assembly business towards the convicted businessman, the senior ministers, in particular former prime ministers Yahya and Salal, did not just get massive personal benefits channeled into their bank accounts and through advantages for their families. They also managed to get massive amounts of money for the financing of the Bouteflika fifth-term election campaign. The brain of this operation, according to the findings of the prosecution, was businessman Ali Haddad, who paradoxically had no official role in the president's campaign. The former head of the Business Confederation FCE said he was working under the direct orders of the president's brother, Saïd Bouteflika. Now serving a 15-year prison term for treason in a military cell in Blida, the latter, that is the brother of the president, refused to testify on this issue despite a brief appearance in the Algiers court. The contributors to the illegal funds are the same businessmen cited earlier, namely Ahmed Mazouz, Hassan Arbawi, and many others who collectively gave the Bouteflika campaign the equivalent of nearly $6.3 million in just a few days, equivalent to about 750 million Algerian dinars. The money was deposited in two accounts in the name of Prime Minister Abdelmalek Salal as the campaign manager, and another man called Abdelghani Za'lan. The prosecutor noted that this constituted a breach of the electoral law, which allows for the opening of only a single account. It is from the account of Abdelghani Za'lan that Ali Haddad proceeded to withdraw millions in cash to store them in his office at his ETRHB company. Haddad explained later that the move was ordered by Saïd Bouteflika, the brother of the president, who feared that the money could end up stolen if it stayed in the Za'lan account. The auto assembly scandal and its ties to illegal campaign financing is just one of the thousands of corruption cases that Algeria is confronted with. The truth is that this case has made it to the public because of the former army chief and now deceased General Gaid Saleh waged a direct war against the Bouteflika family because the latter was planning to remove him from the leadership of the military. The reason we know about this case is because of a vendetta and a clan warfare in which the winner allowed full exposure by the illegal practices of his foes to ensure that his political enemies and their support networks spend the rest of their lives behind bars. The general public knows that the country's leaders in government and business are deeply corrupt, and hence they started the anti-regime movement known as the Hirak on the 22nd of February 2019, and which will continue for a long while in an effort to create a new governance model dominated by the rule of law and by accountability. And with that, thank you for listening.